Hi everyone. Thanks for hanging around this late. We'll not keep you very long. We'll keep it short, 30 minutes. We'll start with the introduction. I am Nishant. I'm founder at BlocksBridge. We are a communication strategy firm for the Bitcoin mining industry. We work with some of the leading names in the industry, provide them contextual knowledge and historical knowledge that is important before you make communications. And moving on to the panelists, let's start with Alex.
Alejandro de la Torre, as you guys already know. I build containers in Spain, proof of work containers. We have 40 foot, 20 foot, and 10 foot. And air-cooled and immersion.
Hi, I'm Chris Manzano with Bitmain. We build containers, and our focus right now is our new AntSpace hydro-cooled containers.
Hi, I'm Sean Reese. I'm the hosting and technical lead for Print Crypto. We sell ASICs and host both our own machines as well as client machines, and we purchase these containers.
Hi, Steve. Good to have you on board as well.
Hey, I'm Steve Barbour. I own Upstream Data. We build all kinds of things: containers, natural gas gensets, black boxes, variations of all that.
And I'm Scot from Digital Shovel. We build crypto mining containers, smart PDU solutions, and automated solutions to make your mining container as autonomous as possible.
All right, thanks for the introduction, guys. So a common topic, or a topic that should be more common or talked about, is how while containers make building a large-scale data center easier and faster, at the same time it comes with challenges such as technical know-how that doesn't exist with the current with most data center operators. So what do you think about that? And some of you are solving those challenges in different ways. We would love to hear about that from each one of you.
Well, sure. It's very straightforward, actually. You know, if you're starting off in the mining farm business, it might not be the most optimal to build a whole entire or to retrofit a building. So you know your best bet is to just get a container that's plug and play, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when people are talking about setting up a data center, the first thing that we're looking at now is everyone in the Bitcoin industry is getting involved in the energy industry. So you're looking for power. If you find the power, that's usually like it's there and I can start building. So I think containers definitely speed up that process. But one thing that we should note is that every single local government has different little differences in the way they apply their regulations. So even with your containers, you might still have to make small adjustments depending on where they are. There is no absolute one size fits all, but you can get pretty close.
Yeah, I think that fundamentally, when you talk about bringing a container on site, everyone has this idea of I want a container, I want an immediate solution, but I think that there's a more important question possibly before you get your container is, do I know what my container requires? Am I familiar with my site plan? Am I familiar with the requirements and the sizing and the capacity of what I'm bringing on site? Everything from physical layout to ampacity in your lines, to the timetable and the cost associated with setting up containers. I feel like that often those things get overlooked when we're just purchasing this plug-and-play product that could take tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in site development before your product even arrives.
Generally, my view on portability of containers is pretty key because how many situations have you guys seen where jurisdictional censorship, obviously the China mining ban that ended up shifting a lot of the mining hash rate to North America. I mean, if you invest in brick and mortar, you can get, of course, better cost per kilowatt, only if they don't ban it from your area. At least with containers and portability, you have a liquid asset. You don't have sunk costs. So, I mean, we do mostly specialize in oil field. We always compare it to like pipelines. You go put a pipeline in the ground, that's a sunk cost. If you lose your energy, you ended up wasting a ton of money putting that in the ground. So having portability of like I mean, Bitcoin mining is a portable demand on energy. It makes the most sense to build portable, I think, in every application.
Yeah, two things I want to follow up on what some of the earlier panelists said. One, in terms of one size fits all in terms of electrical regulation, being in touch with your AHJ or authority having jurisdiction in that particular region is really important. Just because you have a UL certification or an ETL certification like our units do and many other here do as well, doesn't mean that you can simply plug it in. Electrical code is up to interpretation of that local inspector and the way they interpret that, which doesn't mean that just because it has a UL certification for the US that you can simply go and plug it in anywhere else in the US. Further to that, the advantage of containers or container style unit in terms of shape and form factor, one of the biggest thing is the ratio of intake and exhaust area to floor space. When you take and build a data center or a warehouse, people talk about changeovers in air and they forget that it requires you to pass that air all through the miners. You can't just simply exchange the air in the building and saying, okay, I'm gonna have this effective cooling rate as a result, because you don't have true efficiency of the air all going through the miners. Whereas with most Bitcoin mining data center or mining containers rather, the air's coming in one side, it's passing through the miners, and it's going out the other side. So 100% of that air is going through the miners, whereas with a building build, typically that's not the case if you have a rack-style installation.
Thanks, guys. Some topics that you guys covered on was lack of standards in this part of the industry, which is containers, because although it's one size fits all, different container providers and different container manufacturers are not complying, or there are no existing standards right now. So the audience and I would love to learn about what is being done there. Are there any companies or you guys or other people who are working on maybe open source standards or other standards to standardize container making so that it is easier not just for deploying, but also for the manufacturers?
Well, I think there's standards in place.
Open source a container.
I don't know about open source standards, but I think there's standards in place in terms of electrical regulation, and there's various interpretations that people are, it's a polite way of saying, like, ignoring or creatively trying to circumvent, but that makes it seem like there isn't regulation in place, but to be frank, there is. Right, there's lots of regulation in place in terms of means of egress, workspace, arc flash mitigation, an area you have to have in terms of worker safety. That stuff's in place. Just because people are ignoring it doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of regulation in place for that.
There's something that I think all of us agree here is the safety of the container. We know there was not too long ago some container blew up, and the worker there got scarred for life, essentially, from all the fire and all that. So that's something that we take very, very, very seriously, and that's why we use all the best equipment we can use, the best materials and all that. But the container business, like, if you're gonna buy a container, you're paying around $6-7, and if you're lucky, if you know who to speak with, $5,000 per machine. Let's say that's 300 machines in there. Why won't you pay maybe $30,000 more to get a better container that's safe and more, well built, that's following the rules? That's something I always ask myself. Like, you're paying, if you pay 30, 50 grand more, it sounds a lot, but operation costs millions per container. And you get a safe container, and you get a well-built container. Like a lot of Bitcoin miners, they'll try to make the most cost-effective, container solution they can find, but it's not it just doesn't make a lot of sense, because your employees can get hurt and your machines can burn up or whatever. So the industry is moving forward, and I think we're all very, very much in tune with safety and regulations, and yeah. Anyone want to add to that?
I think something to consider when you're talking about safety and regulations, similar to what Scott mentioned just a moment ago, there is a national electric code that we follow. Different municipalities might have additional regulations that they pass, but something that's often overlooked, I think, by the container manufacturer is the delivery of a data package. Like the delivery of this is how to put our product together, this is what our product does, this is how to hook it up. Before I joined this life, previously I was in the aviation industry, and our technical data packages were enormous. And then I understand that the cryptocurrency is not aviation, right? But at the same time, there should be something. And oftentimes it's treated too much as the wild, wild west. When we do have people's lives, we have people and humans inside these containers. We're next to people's homes. We have millions of dollars of assets, irregardless of the container. When we don't receive a data package, that can be extremely detrimental to not only the bottom line, but health and safety as well.
If we're talking about giving out information on how to operate these containers, I think that that's something that we're definitely working on doing better. We have a lot of internal manuals and operations manuals that we can share with people, but sometimes it's hard to find this information on someone's website. So usually a lot of clients work with us one-on-one. They'll contact us. They'll have a question on a specific situation. So I think that not just for us, but for any manufacturer, everything that you do is a learning process, a work in progress based on where you're deploying these. So like an idea is like if you're in a place that's extremely, extremely, extremely hot, it might make sense to even put a tent over your container. It's like there are a lot of variables to consider, and we're working on getting all of these into our documentation and to make it easier for everyone to find it. So I think your point is really important.
Yeah, and I'd agree with you on both of you on that. I mean, when we started making containers, I remember bringing our first container here to the first show in 2019. We were still painting it in the parking lot as we were trying to set it up. And it's very, very much a industry that's in its infancy, and can definitely learn from working with people that were in more sophisticated industry and getting that feedback. And further that, though, going off of your tent example, it's sometimes difficult, at least at the stage some of the businesses are in, to create documentation that work for every scenario. Because as much as clients will come to us and be like, hey, tell me how to plug it in, you don't just plug it in. These are very, very complex things. I mean, we've gotten to a point now where we won't entertain sales calls unless somebody has an electrician or electrical engineer on their end, because they're like, okay, why can you help me with that? I'm like, you need to be licensed in that particular jurisdiction to deal with that. And if they're simply relying on us to send them a product that they're going to quote unquote plug in that's 1 megawatt, it's not going to work. And it doesn't matter what level of documentation I give them. The reality is some of that documentation might be dangerous if they think they're just going to be able to go to their brother Jerry, who has a 1 megawatt generator that was in an oil field, that they're going to hook up themselves on a weekend. You know what I mean?
I just remember when I got in this space, and if you look at what was being built in like 2014, 2015 for containers compared to what's out there today, the pace of innovation has been ridiculous. And even now, with a crazy amount of competition in the space, the pace of innovation is still quite high. So even our company, like to build I've done setup documents, for example, try and help, because a lot of our customers are complete noobs to mining in the oil field. And we've iterated so many times so fast. I think we're all probably guilty to some degree of poor documentation. But on the original question of standardization, I mean, it's such an innovative industry, so nascent. There's so much going on and improving. And I mean, they're just like the water cooling technology that's coming out that's improving is happened rapidly. Even air cooling has got a lot of growth. So I certainly personally don't lean on any regulators to guide us on what standards should be applied, but obviously electrical safety is sort of inherent to this. So it's there's not really a lot new there. There might be just certainly crazy high power densities going on that you don't normally see in most industries, which is, especially like even data center industries, you don't see these kind of power densities. So there's a lot new there and a lot for everyone to learn. I guess erring on the side of caution with the safety side of things and thinking about the worst case scenarios, which often can be easy to overlook when the bull market is getting everyone frantic to get hash rate and to make money. So
it's fair to summarize it as there are some standards in place for traditional electrical infrastructure and other industries that apply to this one, especially in terms of safety. And then there are some that are evolving as you are working on your documentations, including manufacturers of the machines working on documentations that make it easier for people to deploy them. Is that a fair summary of the standards evolution?
Well, I think so. Look at that museum upstairs, like that the CoinDad built, and look at how many iterations of Bitmain machines have. Like, it's incredible. Like the change, the pace, right? So containers are sort of similar to that, I would say. And I mean, there's all kinds of suppliers here, and for everyone here, there's probably another, 20 times like out there in the market of different builds. So it's quite hard to standardize around, but
cool. There's another topic that is often discussed when it comes to containers, which is where is the next technological evolution, like things that you are changing as manufacturers of containers or as people who are deploying these containers or managing these containers. What are you changing? What have you changed in the last 1 or 2 years? And where do you see the change happening in the next 1 or 2 years? Could be because of the water cooling and immersion cooling technologies that are becoming very popular. Could be something else.
So we've changed everything in the last year.
I was about to say, as you were asking that question, I was about to say, I changed everything.
Absolutely everything. That's one of the things I love about the container business. It's extremely fascinating because you're always optimizing and iterate. You get one customer who put the container in Timbuktu, and and then he's like, "Look, I got this problem." I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." So we optimized it because of that, and then we find another customer, etc. We're always optimizing. We're always optimizing. It's just a non-stop. It's really interesting. For me, I come from a different world of mining, from the pool and just mining farms, but the container business itself, I've learned a lot about Bitcoin mining that I thought I knew a lot of. There's so many different variables that pertain to how the container and the miner interact. Like, if there is too much dust in the environment, then the container, the way it's set up, is not correct, or it is correct. It's a good thing, and we're always optimizing.
I think that in many industries, diversification is sometimes lacking, right? It's always good to be diversified, and in the container industry, you just walk through the floor out there, and you can walk along and you can see 5 or 6 different ways to solve the same problem, whether it's placement air filters, or it's the spacing of machines, or it's PDUs, right? So I think that I hope, I'm optimistic that as we move forward, we're going to see some of these very innovative ideas grow and start to really get traction, and then other people are going to come along with new ideas and expand that. And I think that, as Scott said a moment ago, when they showed up in 2019, they were still painting the container in the parking lot, and look where they are now, right? You guys have a double stacked container. And then look at the immersion technology that's coming out there. So what's going to happen a year from now when someone walked in here today and saw a concept or something was just triggered, and they go home and start drawing, and they're going to show up with the next container that's unpainted, right? Or the next huge innovation, maybe for Bitcoin 23 or something.
And where do you think this, or guess where this innovation might be? Could it be the form factor? Could it be something else? You think there might be drastic changes in any particular area?
Yeah, I think as someone who hosts machines day to day, or I have hands on these machines, I think that the biggest place for innovation is going to be inserting and extracting the machines, because unfortunately we have seen a reliability issue with certain models and certain brands of machines that are out there. Just enormous rejection rates, the same failure over and over and over again. And it's a painstaking process in some containers to remove machines. It's a very labor-intensive process to set a container up with some containers. So I think the innovation needs to be maybe not modular, but how to more efficiently insert or remove machines to improve the efficiency on the site. Because you drop a machine and now we're damaged, right? Or someone tries to take a machine off the shelf while it's running because they don't want to take the time to unplug it. They're trying to move it out of the way. Well, now we have a shock issue. We all have experienced those things.
I don't know. Like, there's a lot. I think it's going to be continuous improvements for a long time. I think everyone sort of keeps an eye on each other and sees what each other's doing to get inspiration and continuously improve. I like seeing what the manufacturers of the ASICs are doing and how they've been evolving. And that museum is a good example of how they've evolved. But, whether it's going into water cooling and seeing that sort of like immersion heat reuse or water cooling, like for example, we're interested in water cooling not for heat reuse, but maybe for bigger operating envelope in hotter climates, and also reliability, dumb it down for the end user. I know, like, our challenge over the years, for example, beyond all the regular challenges we all have with containers, is like end users. When we sell to oil and gas companies and you have your contract operator pumper on site who knows nothing about Bitcoin mining, doesn't care at all about Bitcoin mining, someone in their company bought it to go deal with their emissions problem. Building for those guys to operate with no IT, like nothing to support them, has been quite fun. So building something that is natively intuitive is something like our company would, for example, would focus on. Because we had a funny evolution of where when I started, I built in really call it fancy control systems with PLC controllers, remote control, and all this. And then when we started selling them and shipping them, the end user has no idea how to service that. And if we don't have boots on the ground for them to help, good luck like remotely helping them with that. So we dumb it all down, and then the bull market hits, and now everyone wants fancy stuff again. It's been quite a interesting progression, but yeah, I think there's still tons. You'll see a lot different next year from probably everyone here yet. So
I think most of the innovation, I mean, as much as I know other people on this panel try to innovate on their own, a lot of it's reactive. Like, either we find somebody's challenge and we try to react to that, or I remember when we were designing all of our earlier racks, and no offense, Bitmain decided to change the S9 to a completely different form factor on the S15, and it screwed up our...
Can't you guys just pick one form factor? Come on, let's standardize on the ASICs so we don't have to change the racks every day.
We've got other manufacturers out there, so it's a good thing to be able to react to that. But I remember that was one of our huge challenge back in the day, and for me, it's balancing optimization of form factor of the miner to our overall pod design, because like you, we build a custom container that we both try to balance optimization in terms of operator workspace, best way to put the miners in there, and then also logistics, so it fits a form factor that's not oversized, not wide load, doesn't require a crane to move, stuff like that. But most of that, to be honest, with the exception of our most recent progression, has been reactive. It's been stuff that either a client has had an issue that we've had to try to react to, or the input, being the miner or the power type, going from 15 amp circuits on C13s to C19s or two C13 circuits feeding a single miner. Those innovations primarily have been reactive, and as much as I'd like to say we want to stay ahead of the curve, oftentimes it's going to be reactive stuff as a result of input from our clients and stuff from the ASIC manufacturers.
Well, actually, I will bring up one change that you can actually see outside. The container that we brought here today is one of those changes. As you all know, because of COVID and a lot of other shipping, a lot of other issues in the world, shipping has become extremely expensive. Our cooling towers for our ant spaces used to be these massive metal structures that were kind of two-tiered, and those are expensive to ship, and it's easy sometimes for things to happen while they're shipping. So the new structure we have just looks like a regular shipping container. So that's an example of one change that we made. But in the beginning, you brought up automation as something big that was happening. I think that that's really the way that everybody's going to go in the future, because every mine owner's dream is that nothing will go wrong, and if something does go wrong, he can fix it with the push of a button. So software is a huge part of containers going forward, and everyone is looking at how to connect the machines and the software, the chips and everything that's running on these miners to an entire system and kind of bring it together. You don't just have one container, you have a colony of containers, sort of like that whole idea with trees being alive. And if you've ever seen the movie Avatar, everything's connected. That's kind of like one of the dreams in the future. So if you want to talk about automation, or if anybody has thoughts on that, that would be really cool to see.
Well, I disagree with the need for this immense automation. From a hosting and an on-site perspective, we have this recent desire to have the smart PDUs and to have instant access from our smartphone from anywhere in the globe to what every single miner is doing to 0.1% of its power consumption. Well, that's great, but we all also have notifications on our pool. So if I have a machine go down while I'm sitting here talking about this, I'm going to have a customer email me. Or if I lose a breaker or a main bank, right, I'm going to have 30 customers that send me emails before I get out of this chair. So I understand there's a desire to integrate these systems together, but are we spending too much time and too much effort and too much money to create a network system to monitor a network system? Like, it just seems excessive at some point. What happened to old school breakers that are in every commercial building on the planet? We've been like that for 80 years.
Well, I mean, I'll reboot that a bit. Like, if you have an event that's occurring, if it's a breaker, if it's a fault, that's different. That definitely warrants somebody coming out to deal with it. However, if it is, your 3200 watt S19 that all of a sudden starts performing at 1,000 watts or 100 watts for a good 6 minutes, you don't want 30 customers messaging you on that. If it's automatically going to reset the device, turn it off for 6 minutes, turn it back on after that, and leave it on, then only message you after it didn't work 6 times when it tried that, that's going to alleviate a lot of that headache in that problem. Now, if it is something that is a network issue, where you had a cluster of devices that do that, you can also create further automations that's going to say, hey, our network's out, this is why your device is down, it'll be back up when that goes down. Whereas when it is something that is as trivial as just an issue with the that particular miner crash and needed a reboot, that automation saves you a trip, it saves you a pile of time, in my opinion.
I always like to, because we have an oil and gas focus, I like to relate things to common technology in the oil and gas industry. And in oil and gas, you often have two camps. You have an automation camp where everyone wants their wells automated, like fully remotely controlled, remotely monitored, and like site visits once a week, that kind of thing. And then you have another camp that is all about simplicity. Like, for example, in Canada, we have a lot of hydraulic systems running wells. And it's been a big struggle to get the industry to transfer over to VFD systems running wells and automation. And there's sort of like pros and cons to both. So I think there's like a mix of what the market wants. Some people lean heavy into automation. I mean, they might have higher upfront costs, but maybe lower OpEx and some other benefits. But I've seen both sides of the story, and I know we try to build stuff that's sort of redundantly, well, safe of course, but redundantly handle the climate, intuitive for people. And we've tried both automation and fully dumbed down stuff, and we get different reception from different customers on both. So I wouldn't say I have a strong opinion on either. I think there's a market fit for both, but if you can build something sort of modular where you can add automation as a build add-on or something, I find that, to me, is the best approach, where you can sort of bolt it on.
You know, to follow up on what you said, Scott, I'm not suggesting that we don't have automation. I'm just kind of trying to point out the fact that when is enough enough? Like, once again, we have a miner that's running in Timbuktu. I have 4 or 5 different ways to monitor it, right? I can see it on the pool. I can see it with my monitoring software. I can see it with the smart PDU, right? I can see it with a local network scan that can be set to automate and to send notifications. I mean, the list goes on and on. You know, like the Foreman Mining, who Print Crypto uses exclusively, has amazing functionality to diagnose and to pull logs and to reach inside of the machine and fix things, everywhere from factory restarts to new firmware. And that's probably enough. Like we can see the machine is underperforming on the pool when our shares dip, because fundamentally that is the most important. And then 2 swipes on my smartphone using my monitoring software, I can reset the machine, I can push new firmware, and I can move on and have it send me an email with the log tonight. I didn't even have to touch the power. But what happens when we have these tertiary systems, I have a machine go down. Is it network? I don't know. Is it a power supply? I don't know. Is it the smart PDU acting up? I don't know. Well, I have to now go on site and remove 2 of those variables to find the third. Now we add the 4th variable with increased automation. I now have a system that's going to take more time to debug when something odd happens than if I would have just plugged it in like we've done for 11 years now and monitored it on the pool.
Thank you, guys. We are running out of time. So to summarize what we just discussed in this part of the panel, as Steve pointed out, there were 2 camps, which one being pro-automation, one being against automation. In oil and gas industry, we are seeing the same play out in this panel for container solutions, where too much automation is hurting some people's businesses or making it harder to run the business. Just before we leave, I would love to hear from Bitmain whether they have any plans on changing the form factor again.
Oh, for the containers?
For the miners.
For the miners.
A big change, like from S19 to S9 to S15, that kind of change.
Okay, so we're a big company. We have many different departments, and I am happy to say in front of everybody that I have no idea about this particular question. But if I do find out and I find myself on a panel and you ask me this question again and I know, I will answer.
Okay, we trust you.
But if you look at it from the S19 to the S19 XP, I mean, there haven't been any changes there. It's been okay for the recent history. So I would imagine that it's a lot of manufacturing and a lot of changes. So for now, it's okay.
And I assume before you make any such changes, you will reach out to the industry to get comments and involve them in the process before you make such changes.
That is a very good idea, and
that's a great idea, actually.
Like how about just make it square? Like just make the front of this profile square and not have
just
an
don't
air
change
gap.
it. Just leave it. Just leave it.
Just square it out and remove the air gap. That's all.
Look, I'll say this to end it. We actually do take a lot of feedback from our customers. A lot of companies know us, a lot of companies work with us, and if you get to know us on a personal level, and I encourage you to come out and actually build a relationship with our team, you'll see that we do care about your ideas and working with customers to fix issues, because whenever there's an issue, if we don't fix it, that's on us.
I can vouch for that being at Bitmain back in the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for the
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.